In the steel and glass heart of Chicago, Leo Vance was more than a pilot. He was an artist of the stratosphere. As a decorated former Air Force major and a world-class aerospace engineer, Leo had spent a decade developing Vortex Zenith, an autonomous flight correction system designed to eliminate human error during catastrophic weather. Leo's partner, Marcus Sterling, was the CEO of Vortex Air. Marcus was a man who viewed the sky not as a miracle, but as a series of profit margins. He had the charisma of a movie star and the ethics of a vulture. "The Zenith system is flawless, Leo," Marcus had said, standing on the tarmac of O'Hare International Airport. "But the production costs are killing our IPO. We need to swap the titanium sensors for the carbon composite ones from the Shenzhen supplier. We save $400 million. The carbon composites can't handle the thermal expansion at 40,000 feet, Marcus," Leo warned, his voice firm. "If those sensors hairline fracture, the AI will lose its orientation. It's a death trap. I won't sign off on it." Marcus smiled, a cold, calculated expression. "Of course, Leo. Safety first. I'll tell the board we're sticking to the titanium." But Marcus was a liar. He bypassed Leo, forged the engineering stamps, and installed the cheaper sensors in the first fleet of V747 Lux liners. 6 months later, a test flight over Lake Michigan went horribly wrong. Leo was in the cockpit, testing the auto recovery during a simulated storm. At 35,000 feet, the carbon sensors shattered under the pressure. The plane went into a violent, unrecoverable spin. Leo managed to crash-land the plane in the water, saving the crew, but the aircraft was a total loss. Before the investigation even began, Marcus struck. He didn't just blame the hardware, he destroyed the man. Marcus's legal team found traces of synthetic opioids in Leo's blood sample, samples that Marcus had paid a lab technician to contaminate. He leaked a fake cockpit voice recording where Leo sounded slurred and disoriented. "Captain Leo Vance was flying high, but not on adrenaline," the headline screamed across Chicago. Leo was stripped of his wings, his engineering degree was revoked by the board, and he was sentenced to 6 years for gross negligence and endangerment. While Leo sat in a cell, Marcus used the insurance payout and the vulnerability of the crash to stage a hostile takeover of the entire aerospace sector. He became the king of the Chicago skies. 5 years later, a man named Jax walked into the service entrance of the Vortex Air Hangar 7 at Midway Airport. He was a ghost of a man, gaunt with grease-stained skin and a heavy limp from the crash. He wore a dirty baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. "We need night shift scrubbers for the engine bays," the foreman said, barely looking up from his clipboard. "The work is disgusting. You'll be elbow deep in jet fuel and hydraulic fluid for 10 hours a night. You want it?" "I don't mind the grease," Jack said. His voice was a low mechanical rasp. For months, Jax lived in the belly of the beasts. While Marcus Sterling was in the penthouse drinking aged cognac, Jax was crawling into the intake manifolds of Marcus's private fleet. To the other mechanics, Jax was just a quiet, hard-working grease monkey who never complained. He took the shifts no one wanted, the 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. slots when the hangars were empty and the security guards were drowsy. But Jax wasn't just cleaning, he was re-engineering. Every night he used a specialized data siphon, a device he had built from scavenged avionics parts, to tap into the plane's flight data recorders, the black boxes. He discovered that Marcus was still using the cheap sensors, hiding the error logs in a hidden partition of the software. Jax began his silent sabotage. He didn't break the engines, he ghosted them. Using his knowledge of the Zenith code, he installed a logic virus into Marcus's private jet, the Vortex one. He programmed it to recognize Marcus's unique biometric signature. Whenever Marcus sat in the executive chair, the plane's internal sensors would begin to slightly recalibrate the oxygen mix, making Marcus feel perpetually lightheaded and anxious, mimicking the symptoms of altitude sickness. The most critical part of Leo's plan was the dead man's switch. Inside the black box of Vortex 1, Leo created an encrypted file named Project Icarus. Every time Marcus made a private phone call using the plane's satellite link, the black box recorded it. Every time Marcus discussed the fudged safety numbers with his CFO, the data was logged. One night, Marcus walked into the hangar unexpectedly. He was accompanied by a high-ranking senator. They were walking past the engine bay where Jax was working. "The new merger will go through by Friday," Marcus was saying, his voice echoing in the vast hangar. "Once we control the FAA Oversight Committee, we can stop reporting the sensor failures entirely. The public doesn't need to know why a plane shakes. They just need to know it lands." Jax stayed hidden in the shadows of the turbine, his heart beating with a cold, rhythmic fury. He gripped a wrench so hard his knuckles turned white. "Is that engine clean, you?" Marcus shouted, pointing his expensive cane at the shadows where Jax stood. Jax stepped out, head bowed, his face obscured by a layer of black oil. "Almost done, Mr. Sterling. Just flushing the lines." "Hurry up," Marcus sneered, not even recognizing the man who had once been his best friend. "That plane needs to be in the air by 0600. I have a world to run." As Marcus walked away, Jax looked up at the tail of the plane. He had finished the over-tuning. The sensors were now linked to a remote frequency that only he controlled. "You have a world to run, Marcus," Jax whispered, wiping the oil from his hands. "But I own the air you're about to fly in, and in my world, there are no bailouts." Jax pulled a small black remote from his pocket, a scavenged flight controller. He pressed a single button. On the plane's internal diagnostic computer, a hidden file began to decompress. File name: The Reckoning. Status: ready for takeoff. The morning of the Vortex Global merger broke over Lake Michigan, with a biting frost. Marcus Sterling walked across the tarmac, flanked by his legal team and a swarm of reporters. He was heading for Vortex 1, his custom-built Gulfstream G700. Today he wasn't just a CEO, he was becoming the king of the aviation industry. In the maintenance bay, Jax watched the takeoff from a small, cracked monitor. He wasn't wearing his grease-stained jumpsuit today. Underneath a heavy winter coat, he wore his old flight suit, the one with the Major Leo Vance name tag ripped off, leaving only a scar in the fabric. "Vortex 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Wind 270 at 15 knots. Good flight, Mr. Sterling." The tower radio crackled. Leo opened his ruggedized laptop, connected to a high-gain satellite uplink he had hidden in the hangar's ventilation shaft. On his screen, a 3D wireframe of Vortex 1 appeared. "Enjoy the climb, Marcus," Leo whispered. "The air gets very thin at 40,000 feet. The high-altitude cage." 30 minutes into the flight, at an altitude of 41,000 feet, the luxury cabin of Vortex 1 was silent, save for the clinking of crystal glasses. Marcus was reviewing the final merger documents. Suddenly, the cabin lights flickered from a warm amber to a harsh emergency red. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed rapidly, 3 times, then 4, a code Leo used to use for system critical. "What's happening?" Marcus barked at the intercom. "Captain, report." The pilot's voice came back, sounding panicked. "Sir, the autopilot is locked. I'm being overridden by an external command. The flight surfaces aren't responding." On the large 4K entertainment screen in the cabin, the stock market data vanished. In its place appeared a grainy black-and-white video of the Lake Michigan crash from 5 years ago. Altitude 35,000 feet. Status unrecoverable spin, a synthesized voice announced over the cabin speakers. It was Leo's voice, but distorted, sounding like it was coming from the bottom of the ocean. "Is this a joke?" Marcus screamed, clutching his armrests as the plane began to buffet violently. "Who is this?" "This is the Black Box, Marcus," the speakers boomed. "I'm the ghost you tried to bury in the wreckage." The plane suddenly banked hard to the left, a 45-degree angle that sent papers and laptops flying across the cabin. Marcus was pinned against the window, staring out at the clouds spinning beneath him. "Leo?" Marcus gasped, his face turning gray. "Leo Vance? You're dead. You're a drunk in a gutter." "I was in the gutter, Marcus, cleaning your engines, polishing your wings, watching you sell safety while you installed death traps." On the cabin screen, the Project Icarus files began to play. It was the recording of Marcus's private conversation in the hangar from Part 1. The public doesn't need to know why a plane shakes. They just need to know it lands. "Turn it off," Marcus shrieked. "I'll give you money. 10 million. 20. "I don't want your money, Marcus. I want you to feel the G-force." Leo, sitting in the cold Chicago hangar, moved his joystick. He wasn't crashing the plane. Not yet. He was putting it into a controlled stall. The engines of Vortex 1 throttled back to idle. The silence was terrifying. The plane began to fall. Not a dive, but a slow, sickening drop. "Warning! Stall! Stall! Pull up!" The plane's automated voice shrieked. "Leo, please!" Marcus was weeping now, the billionaire reduced to a terrified child. "I'll confess. I'll tell the FAA everything. Just level the plane." "The FAA is already listening, Marcus," Leo replied. "I've bridged this audio feed to the Chicago Air Traffic Control, the NTSB, and the live stream of your own merger press conference. The whole world is in the cockpit with you." In the boardroom back on the ground, the investors watched in horror as their king begged for his life, admitting to every forged stamp, every cheap sensor, and every contaminated blood sample. The final approach. The plane leveled out at 10,000 feet, just above the choppy gray waves of Lake Michigan, the exact spot where Leo's life had been destroyed. "The autopilot is now disengaged, Captain," Leo said to the actual pilot in the cockpit. "You have manual control. Land the plane at Midway. There will be federal marshals waiting at the gate." Leo closed his laptop. He stood up, his body aching from the old crash injuries, but his spirit felt lighter than air. He walked out of the hangar just as the sirens began to wail in the distance. As he reached the airport fence, he looked up. A streak of white vapor trailed behind a descending jet. Vortex 1 was coming home, but Marcus Sterling was already a dead man. Leo pulled his old pilot's wings from his pocket, the ones he had kept hidden in his toolbox for 5 years. He pinned them back onto his coat. The major was back. The captain was home. "Clear for landing," Leo whispered to the wind. "The sky is clean again."